I want you to look at this picture very carefully. Briefly, I'm going to tell you what this picture is about. But let me say first that here I'm not going to say this is the smoking gun that proves that evolution happens and we can observe it, even at the level of animals. I'm not saying that this is a proof. I'm saying that what I'm proposing is that everyone should just reflect honestly about what this means, whether or not this is some evidence or not, although it might not be the smoking gun, but it's still a very important piece of information, I believe. I'm briefly going to tell you what this is about. In the meantime, I hope you have tried to make your own idea about what these two animals are, these two pets. I'm not sure everyone has been able already to figure out what species we are talking about. So this is, in fact, the result of a very special experiment. So in the meantime, you can still watch the picture. Some may have figured that out, some may not. And realize that this is a very special kind of experiment. So I want to assure everybody that no harm was made in the process and no manipulation, gene manipulation, was ever made to kind of, let's say, create these two pets. This is the result of a very special experiment. During the beginning of the 1900s in Russia, that then became the Soviet Union, well, an experiment started that lasted for about 50 years. What was the experiment about? Several foxes were taken from the wild, and then in these large group of foxes, the ones that showed that were more keen to cohabit with humans were selected. So usually this meant they were the less fearful and at the same time the less hostile, two characters that quite often go together. So it would be fearful in general but hostile if they would feel they are in danger. So a few of them in the group would be less fearful of humans. Those ones would have been selected and the other ones would have been released. And then those selected would have been taken in the group, would be mate, they would mate with each other, so they would mate to inbreed with each other. And then new generation came to light, and then in the new generations the same system was implemented. Among the old offsprings, only the ones that showed to be less fearful of humans, more adapt to live with humans in a kind of domestic way, they would have been selected as remaining part of the group, and the others would have been released. This went on for about 50 years. There were no manipulation of these animals, only artificial selection, in the sense that the desirable traits were chosen according to how the life with humans was for these animals. So this is a very interesting thing. So it must be stressed that at no time there was any selection made because of physical traits, because of the morphology of these animals. Strictly and only they were selected according to their behavior that was most suited to cohabiting with humans. Of course, many know, but not maybe everybody knows, that the gene code is a very complex thing. So some traits might be related to others, and just as an example, then take hormones that may code for that may be related to the behavior of an animal, but at the same time they're responsible for some of the physical traits of that animal. So this explains also why the morphology of these animals changed, and curiously they really resemble in some sense dog pets. So as you see, I'm just inviting people to reflect on this piece of data. This is the effect of 50 years, only 50 years. Well, I have to stress that I'm not totally sure about that, because the experiment went on for 50 years, but these animals are still alive today, and I'm not sure whether in the decades that followed, that were to some extent these animals were still selected according to any principle of the type that I just described, or in fact they were just, making new offsprings, and they were just being preserved because they were interesting from the point of view of the theory of evolution and from the point of view of genetics. In fact, they're still studied today. Unfortunately, there were about 700 10 years ago, and now there are only about 100. Just because of the monetary support of this experiment, quote. And what is really interesting in this is that, in fact, it's often said that evolution does not happen, especially what is called, quote again, microevolution, which is just a kind of invented word. Well, it's true that on our lifetimes it's very difficult to see evolution at the scale of large animals. But here you see that if we increase the selective pressure without in any way conditioning the natural principles of life at work, that we have offsprings and new generation that are selected according to some rule, so by increasing this selective pressure we can actually condense in a shorter amount of time what natural selection would make to occur on a longer time scale. I think this is a very interesting piece of data, and I invite everyone to reflect on that. To be honest, again, I'm not saying that this is like the definitive proof, but it certainly is something that makes us think, because it is quite curious how these animals changed in such a short time, only because there were some selective pressure on them, so that some of the animals were more adapted to survive. Quote, I mean, survive here means remain part of the group. It's not that you kill the ones that are not adapted. So this is another new species, because they still can mate with other foxes and make new offsprings if they're just released in the wild. But nevertheless, we are talking about a very short amount of time compared to evolutionary timescales that are usually used by natural selection.